This week I read this book by this author, David Burns. He's a psychologist. And just to let you know, I really don't trust a lot of psychologists, about 50% of them. Highly skeptical. But I really like this guy because 28 years ago, he wrote this book on depression and anxiety called Feeling Better. It really was a great book on helping people with depression. That's his specialty. So now he's come out with this book on helping people work together, especially marriages. But he starts off the book by admitting his specialty is depression and marriage. And since that's his specialty, he's good for marriage counseling. That's a joke, sorry. But he tells a story that he was kind of shocked because they did this study, and they do it every year, on what therapy is best to improve people's marriages. And it's always the same percentage. And the shocking part is it doesn't matter if you choose cognitive therapy or behavioral therapy or all these other therapies. It's always the same percentage. And what they found out is this. Any of those techniques, they'll work if the couple wants to improve their marriage. But the odd part is, a lot of couples, they really don't want to improve their marriage. And he gives us an example where this one client of his, he's this businessman from San Francisco, works with them on depression, does a great job, and he says, I still want to meet with you about improving just my life. And one of his problems was his marriage, so for like 3 weeks he comes in and just has journals complaining about his wife. So then David Burns says, well, can I ask you a question? Imagine that the mafia is after you. And the mafia says, listen, we will kill you unless you ruin your marriage. What would be the 5 things that you would have to do to ruin your marriage? And he says, well, I could, instead of coming home at work, I could stop by a bar and drink and then come home. And when my wife, Marge, when Margie gets upset with my drinking, I could just pour myself another drink. She has an alcoholic father. That would really annoy her. Or the kids. When she's disciplining the kids, I could say, that's just your mother. You do whatever you want. Don't worry about it. Yeah, that's just her. That would really humiliate her. Or Margie doesn't have a college education. The third thing I can do is when we're out with friends and she gives an opinion about something, I could say, what book did you read out of that? Do you even read a book? That would humiliate her. Or what I could do is I don't know if I mentioned this one, have an affair. When I go on my business trip, I can have an affair, and I could leave like the show tickets on the counter for her to discover. That would devastate her. And he says, well, do you do any of those things? And the guy says, well, yeah, I do them all. So David Burns says, well, why do you want to remain married? And he says, I will never divorce Margie. We'll stay married for the kids. But really what David Burns points out is that the only reason why he wants to stay married, is because he wants to live a life where he can humiliate his wife. All he wants to do is really be in this endless battle. He says he's all for marriage, but it's really just to dominate and be superior to her. And so what they discovered is this. It doesn't matter what therapy you choose. What matters is if you want to improve your marriage, you will. And he has some great techniques for doing it, but first you have to want it. And I don't do a lot of marriage counseling. To be honest, I've never been married. But sometimes I'm forced into it. And for years, I actually have the same thing. If a couple comes, I try and avoid it. But if I meet with a couple, this is my whole spiel. Do you want to stay married? That's the only question I really have. Do you want to stay married? And would you do anything to keep this marriage alive? And after that, if I hear any like, yes, but, you know there's no way I can help you. If you're willing to work, do anything to get to this point where you love each other, believe it or not, people find a way. Now, at this point, if you're wondering, what the heck does this have to do with the Good Samaritan? Well, it really does. Because remember, in the Bible, in Catholicism, religion is a marriage. We're married to God. And our life is supposed to be, in this marriage, a life of love. And my point being, the same way some people want to say that they're married, but really they just want somebody to dominate. A lot of times people will say that they're religious, but they just want to be superior to other people. And so in today's gospel, this lawyer comes up to Christ and says, what must I do to have everlasting life, life eternal? And Christ responds back by giving him the Shema. What is the greatest commandment? And Christ quotes the Shema. The Shema is this Jewish prayer that if you're a faithful Jew, it's written on your door. When you wake up in the morning, what you pray is to love with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And then Jesus adds, and your neighbor as yourself. That's the center of Judaism. So when he said, what's the greatest commandment? It's to love with all your heart, mind, and soul. God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Your neighbor with all your heart, mind, and soul. Even to love yourself. That's what religion comes down to. And the lawyer wants to have a lawyer's trick. He wants some sort of loophole. So he says, well, and who's my neighbor? You know, most people just define their neighbor as their close friends or actual neighbors or the people they like. He wants a loophole. And so the loophole, Christ gives him this parable. It's a parable of the Good Samaritan. I love the parable of the Good Samaritan. I hate when people say it just means be nice to other people. That's not what it means. You have to understand that, look at the characters. You have this priest. This priest is headed to Jerusalem to pray, and he sees his brother Jew, beaten up, left for half dead, and he's on his way to pray, and he crosses the road and keeps going. The shocking part is that priests pray. You think a life of worship and prayer was supposed to make you a more loving person. It didn't. Then you have a Levite. And Levite is like a scripture scholar, a theologian. He comes. He sees his brother half dead. He crosses the street. Just to let you know. And granted, I tend to be angry. This one priest who, I have to admit, I think he's lazy and worthless. Just my opinion, but I'm very judgmental. I am. But, if you're in the hospital, he won't be coming to see you. He'll always have some excuse. And so this priest says to me, he says, well, you have to understand, the priest in the story and the Levite, if you would have touched blood, you can no longer go to the temple. Or the Levite, if he would have helped the guy, he wouldn't have been able to give his lecture and then not earn money. So, according to the book of Leviticus, if they touched him, they wouldn't be able to earn their living. So they really were doing only what the Bible said. This priest says that. So, because I'm naturally angry, and I said, that's the point! The point is, yes, sometimes to be compassionate, it costs you. Sometimes to be compassionate. But you can use the Bible to find some weird phrase and say, this is why I need to cross the street. Because God forbid it should cost me something to help somebody. And then you could take the guy who's injured, who's robbed and beaten up. To be honest, he's kind of an idiot. Because the road, the Jericho road, everybody knew that the nickname for that was the bloody road, because so often people got hijacked. Even in 1930, there was this great story that still people traveling by car, they'd put rocks across the road and then just hijack people. It was a very dangerous road for centuries. You never travel at the wrong time of the day, and you always travel in a group, or you're going to get hijacked and beat up. So the point being is you can say, well, clearly this guy's an idiot. It's his own fault. And it is. He's an idiot. You don't travel that dangerous road alone. Same reason why I'd never go into Star late at night. It's dangerous. So the guy, you can blame him. But really, if you're truly loving, you don't look for excuses. If you're truly loving, you don't look for some reason to get out of being compassionate. You don't blame the victim. And along comes a Samaritan. And you have to understand, Samaritans, technically they're Jewish in a way, but they're a heretic. And they truly are. They are heretics, got to tell you. But the heretic, this is a shocking part, the heretic knows love. And that's the very center of Judaism. So it's the heretic who cares for him, pays for him, brings them to a place of hospitality. And just to let you know, the Gospel of Luke is always about hospitality. It is Jesus' favorite word, is to show hospitality. The heretic is the one who shows hospitality. Imagine being a Jew and you wake up in the hospital and see the person who paid for your bill, saved you, was your worst enemy. You know, that's where the story starts. And the odd part is, remember, the whole story is told because the lawyer wants some sort of loophole. The point of the Good Samaritan is there is no loopholes on the law of love. There's no excuse. You either love or you don't. And so Jesus then flips it. And Jesus, if you think about it, he didn't answer the question. The question was, who is my neighbor? Jesus answered the question, what kind of neighbor are you? And then he asked him the question, which one did the will of God? And notice the lawyer, he's so bigoted, he can't say the Samaritan. So he says the one who showed mercy. He's still a bigot even after that story. And like this Good Samaritan story, it's part of the parables called the surprise parables. They're really kind of shocking. The surprise parables are, Jesus gives 3 of them right in a row. And the parables are, you think that person is your enemy, that person's a problem. Surprise, that's a person who's really doing the will of God. You think you're a Christian? You think you follow God? Surprise, you don't. The surprise parables are, if you're going to sit in the kingdom of God, just love everybody. And then when you get there, surprise, life is all about love. And the best part is, if you think about it, Jesus is the Good Samaritan. Jesus is the one who, the priests and the Levites, they hate Jesus. They hate Jesus because he says he shows too much hospitality to sinners. He is the Good Samaritan. He is the outsider who shows nothing but love and will die for it. And a lot of people want to make the litmus test of orthodoxy, whether you know the right answers to your catechism or something. In the Gospel of Luke, the orthodox person is not the one who has the right answers, but the one who loves with all their heart, mind, and soul. And if you notice the end, Jesus says, do this and you will live. There's only one other time Jesus says, do this and you will live. And it's always at the Last Supper, the Eucharist. This means it's a high command. You must show love without any loopholes. You have to force yourself to love even when it costs you. Do this and you will live. And I love the idea that he combines loving other people without exceptions or loopholes with also healing the world and the Eucharist. He says that at the Eucharist. Do this and you will live about the Eucharist. So as we gather to celebrate the Eucharist, why don't we be the Good Samaritan? Why don't we be the people who want to heal the world by trying to love with all our heart, mind, and soul? Don't allow ourselves to make excuses. And otherwise, if you're not, you're like the guy in the opening story. You want to say that you're married, but really you just want to show superiority to other people. If you want to say that you're married to God, let's live it without making excuses for love. So together, let us stand and profess our faith.